this afternoon in the Milton room of the town hall here in Milton, and I'm being interviewed by two gentlemen that are students to find out what a mayor of a municipality does or doesn't do. So it gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome you here, and certainly I'll hopefully be responding to all the questions that you have on me on what I do or what I don't do. So a great big Milton welcome to the students here on this interview here this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Mayor Gordon Krantz, for the opening. Let's begin with a little bit background about you. So would you tell us why you became mayor? Are there any determining points or events that led to this decision?
Well, going back now approximately 40 years ago, and I'll be celebrating being sworn in as mayor of the town of Milton on December the 1st, 2020 for 40 years. And I'm quite often asked that question, what got me involved? And I quite often will say, it was my big mouth that got me into politics, believe it or not. And of course, I was no different then, as a lot of people are no different now. It's very, very easy to criticize an elected person, and I was criticizing elected people. Well, quite often you'll hear people say, well, you know, you go to beauty salons and females will do this, chit chat. Well, I can assure you, us guys are just as bad, if not worse. Well, guess what? I was in a barber shop criticizing what the elected people at that time was doing or not doing, and someone had enough nerve to say, Mr. Krantz, if you think you can do any better, why don't you run? That's all I needed, is somebody to challenge me if I thought I could do any better, which of course, that person was he was right. Put up or shut up. So I put up and here I am. I was elected as a councillor in 1965, elected as mayor in 1980. So I was a councillor for 15 years before being elected as mayor. So I had some pretty good training grounds there before I elected as mayor. But that's really how I got involved in public life. I just thought I'd make life, or hopefully make life just a little bit better for us people in the town of Milton.
Thank you, Feline. You've been doing a great job. So obviously all of this takes a lot of hard work, right? And you must have stayed on task all the time. So what kept you on task, and what was the method that you used to stay on schedule and not fall behind?
Yeah. Well, one of the philosophies that I often work by, if someone tells me I can't do this or I can't do that, all I will say is just remove the letter T off of can't and you'll find you can. So I'm not easily discouraged. And of course, anything that's worthwhile is worthwhile pursuing and sticking to it, even though sometimes you will fail, but that's life. And I often say if you do 10 things, all you want to hope is you do 8 or 9 of them right, because I can assure you that every one of us, including me, will fail on something at some point in time. So just accept it. That's the way of life.
Thank you. The words of wisdom from our mayor. So thank you, and enough about you. Now let's move on to our town, Milton, right? So why do you think Milton is a great place to live, study, and work?
Well, I often say, with a great deal of sincerity as well, we've got everything going here. Now, of course, any mayor of any municipality would probably say the same thing. But our crime rate in Milton and Halton is low, not to suggest that there's none of it. A world biosphere, we have the Niagara Escarpment, a good portion of the Niagara Escarpment, which is a world biosphere running through this community. So there's a lot of green space in the town of Milton. But not only that, but we're one of the most highly educated communities there is in the province of Ontario. Our education level is way up there, way above the provincial average. So those young families, there's many, many young families now in Milton. So live, work, and play. That's what it's all about. And of course, it's the people of the town of Milton that makes any community, and that makes it a great community here in this community. Being one of 4 municipalities in the region of Halton, of course, there's Burlington, Oakville, Milton, and Halton Hills, which is made up of Acton and Georgetown and rural ports too. Milton geographically is a fairly large community with roughly 137 square miles. That's a large rural community. But most of our population is in the urban area. And Milton's population, unofficially right now, as we talk in November of 2020, is roughly 140,000 people. When I first got elected, just so you can imagine how things have transpired, when I was first elected prior to regional government, Milton's population in 1965 was roughly a little over 5,000 people. So you can see how the population has doubled, quadrupled more than once.
Yeah, and actually this is perfect because it brings us right to our next point. So consider this statement: Milton is a fast-growing town, right? So are there any plans to improving the Milton public transportation system?
Most definitely. It's rather coincidental that we're talking about this now. In the next day or two, there's going to be a public announcement with participation and cooperation with the provincial government, the federal governments. They realize that transit is the way of the future. And of course, we hear a great deal about climate change, and rightfully so. Yeah. It's an issue. Once we get over this virus issue, I think that'll surface once again as being one of the top issues, not only in Halton or in Ontario and Canada, but across the globe. Yeah. Matter of fact, we should take it serious. I take it serious. But public transit is going to be one of the ways that we'll be able to help contribute to eliminating some of the climate change that we're experiencing. And that's just one of many things. So public transport, getting people like you and I out of our automobiles, using buses, trains, planes, stuff like that. So that's the way of the future. And we're buying into it here in the town of Milton.
Yep. So let's talk about, there's transportation, right? So transportation takes you to facilities. So the latest facility in Milton is the Sherwood Community Center, right? So it's been a huge success and everybody's loving it, and you can do a lot of things in that facility, right? Are there any plans for, let's just say, the next 5 years to open more of those?
Yeah, there will be, and of course as growth happens, you have to phase and stage it properly. There's no use of building a brand new facility if you don't have the people to use it, so one has to balance the other. It's the same with shopping. You could build a plaza or a mall, open up several stores, but if you don't have the people that support those, then it's not worth it. As long as you're into private enterprise, that's what you need. You need people to support it. So as we grow, Milton's population projected 20 years out from now will be probably 250,000 people. So those facilities will be needed and wanted. Now, one of the things when we talk about facilities, I think the way of the future, and I can assure everybody that I have no crystal ball, but I predict that private enterprise will probably get into the business of providing more and more facilities, such as baseball diamonds, arenas, stuff like that, maybe even libraries, but it'll always have to be supported by the taxpayers' dollars. But I think you'll probably find that private enterprise will get into a lot of the business too. User pay, and of course, you know, the old tax structure can only take so much. So elected people like me always have to be aware of that. If you want a facility, you want to be involved in an activity, and of course, you know, you should have the ability to pay for it. So I see that being the way of the future as well.
Yeah, and this ties up to one of your previous interviews where you pointed out the difference between needs and wants. So this is a great point, and it ties back to that you're still standing at the same point and you still support that point. So let's move on to our next point, the youth of Milton. So about 26% of the population of Milton is under the age of 19, correct?
Yes, I believe you're. As I think I mentioned earlier on, we are the youngest on average in the town of Milton in the province of Ontario, believe it or not. So yeah, youth is pretty important. And how you engage that is some of the schools, as you two gentlemen are well aware, are overcrowded. Sometimes the education system here in Milton and Halton has problems keeping up with space, especially for public schools.
Yeah, especially for public schools. So, are there any like what efforts are made to keep the youth active and involved in the community?
Well, of course, we have what we refer to as the Mayor's Youth Advisory Committee, and they appear before council at least once or twice a year to suggest to us, that young people, what they would like to see. And again, getting back to your point, I always suggest to even the youth, separate out your wants from your needs. What do you think? What do you think the youth need? Not necessarily want, but they're pretty darn good on suggesting what's needed. And some of it falls back into some of the recreational facilities there too. And I think we've done a reasonably good job on providing some of those. So we rely on them for what they think is absolutely necessary. And it's worked reasonably well for us, believe it or not, in the last while.
Yeah, I mean, Milton has, considering like our area, we already have 3 community centers, so that's already pretty good. And I feel like the more we expand and the more housing, the more facilities will be available for us. So let's fast forward 10 years from now. So the youth are now finished university, college, they want to work, right? So do you have anything to say on the job market in like 5 to 10 years so that we don't have to leave Milton for our work?
Yeah, most definitely. One of the things that I would really strongly urge young people to think about, and I still know that there's individuals that drop out of school, whether it be high school, but if you really want to succeed in the business world or even in the world in general, education is huge. So, go to college, go to university, because that's how you're going to succeed. And again, I've said many, many times, it might sound a little cliche on my part, but young people are my future. So if I don't look after my future, then I'm not doing myself a service. So it's young people that's going to be looking after people of my era. So making sure they're educated, making sure that they got a chance in the world is going to be vitally important to a community. And that's really what it's all about. And I think most young people are reasonably well grounded. These are days of changing times, big time. The social media is playing a huge role on the transformation of society. 50 years ago, you couldn't travel around the world in a matter of seconds. Now, just by the click of a finger, you can be in contact with somebody on the other side of the world. So, communications, very important. So,
Yep.
I often suggest to young people, be ready and available to communicate with one another, regardless whether it's your next door neighbor or somebody halfway around the world. So communication is going to be a huge part of it moving forward.
Yeah, he's correct about that. So just one more question, right? What message do you have for the youth, and if you have any final advice for us?
Well, stay focused on what you want to do. The average young person today will probably change his or her career likely 3 or 4 times. So just don't zero in on one thing, and I use it just as an example. It's great to be a lawyer, but you might want to think about being a doctor. You might want to think about being a plumber. You might want to think about being a carpenter. So there's many, many things out there that people should think about adapting to, because you talk about making a good living, and I just take plumbing and carpentry as an example. There's a pretty good livelihood to be made in businesses such as that. I myself personally come from a business background. I was in the oil business for many years, wholesale distribution. So I was a private entrepreneur. And this is what young people might want to think. When I go back to what I said, and when people say, well, Gord, you can't do this, you can't do that, you'll never succeed. And all I say is, watch me. So you have to have that drive to get up and say, I'm going to make it happen. And if you have that initiative, you'll make it happen.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, our Mayor of Milton, Gordon Krantz. Thank you so much.
And I thank you very much, and I wish you much success on getting this together and getting the message out there to the world, especially the youth of this community. They are my future.
Thank you so much.